In the summer of 2023, a friend invited me to visit him in Greece at the end of August. It was July and I was feeling unfit. There was only one logical option.
See you later.
Bye, darling.
It was after 11 by the time I set off.
Have fun, Max.
I cycled out along the portway, past a ruined Roman villa and under the Clifton suspension bridge, then along the dock front of Bristol. These were the first pedals of a 6,000 kilometre journey.
Ready for middle of Bristol, Queen Square, a couple of miles down, only 2,000 to go. Spot check, I wounded my hand climbing a couple of days ago, very convenient. Got cold, bike's already making some noises, but I'm sure it'll be fine. It's a bike, navigation system, panniers, camelback. Gonna head to Bath and then sleep tonight somewhere in Salisbury Plain, I don't know where. We're on our way.
I headed towards the Bristol-Bath cycle path, a staple of all my long cycles. The flat path goes for miles along the route of an old abandoned railway line. Well, mostly abandoned. I arrived in Bath at 1:30 and stopped at a pub to recharge my phone and myself. I kept a journal every day and here I wrote my first entry. I found a wind-up speaker by the side of the path which told old railway story. Then I entered the long, dark twin tunnels. I whistled as I went. Canals and lunch came next, then they gave way to the fields and firing ranges of Salisbury Plain. Big hill. That was a lie. There were much bigger hills to come. I got to the campsite around 6. It's cool. It has a hobbit hole. As I put my tent up, I broke my pole. Classic. After help from a lent, peg and mallet, I got my wonky tent up and went in search of food. The pub nearby was closed, so I cycled 5 kilometres to another one. They didn't do food. I had 2 pints and a bag of crisps. That'll do. Awake at 5 and out at 7. I missed the sunrise. I was heading for Stonehenge, but when I got there it was closed, so I took a longer, more circuitous route.
Stonehenge was closed, so I'm going a different way.
The stones still weren't open when I got there, so I looked at them from this viewpoint. There were people by them. I could have broken in, but instead I went for breakfast. After not eating last night, this was the best full English I ever had. I continued along quiet roads through towns and fields, heading for the coast. The smell of the sea made me feel like I was really travelling. The water was remarkably blue, but perhaps in an unnatural, polluted kind of way, rather than the clear blue of Greece. Hopefully I'll see that again soon. I got to the Southampton to Portsmouth ferry, but had no cash, so they let me ride for free. Soon I found myself in a huge cabbage field. Big old field. My beeline died, so I taped my portable charger to my bike frame, not for the last time. Soon I was on another ferry in Portsmouth itself. This was a day of ferries. I arrived at a friend's place around 6. After a beer and a rest, I went for food and more beer. I had so much beer I was almost late for the ferry. I did make it though, just. The ferry was a few hours. I tried to sleep. France tomorrow.
Your attention please. The following is a safety announcement. Access to the garage is restricted during the crossing.
We wish you a pleasant morning.
Awoken at 5:30 by the lights coming on. On leaving the ferry, I met a white-whiskered Welshman and a German student who had just done John O'Groats to Land's End. On taking this photo of my bike, I dropped it, broke my phone holder and my phone screen. A good start to France. I cycled inland for a bit, crossing over the Caen Canal at Pegasus Bridge, which my brother later informed me was important in D-Day. Then it was back out towards the coast on gravel paths. I'm pretty sure I passed a few German gun outposts. It's hard to tell. I passed through a few of these resort-style towns, then stopped on a beach. I had a task to do.
That's the English Channel. Soon I'll be doing that in the southern Mediterranean. Europe in the way. Time to go get some breakfast. They did the classic French thing of me talking in French and them talking in English. I guess it's very obvious. It'll get better.
Most of the day was spent passing through quaint towns and huge wheat fields. I've done a couple of long cycles before, but never in a foreign country, so I had to remember which side of the road to cycle on. In this field I got stuck behind a cow for a bit. A family friend had informed me of the best place to get water on long French cycles. Churchyard water time. The clear day turned into drizzle, and out came the coat for the first time of many.
There's so many videos of cornfields through this northern France's and patisseries.
I reached a 40-kilometre bike path which had a nice place to rest. I was worried cycling would make me lose my climbing ability. These fears were unfounded. The flat path continued and the sun came out very briefly.
I feel like I'm in Holland.
A friend of a friend had kindly agreed to host me for the night, and as I neared, it started to rain. We went for beers anyway, and I met his brother and a few of his friends, most of whom spoke English. Afterwards, I got what they call a French taco. It was just a huge wrap, which weighed 1 kilogram, was the length of my forearm. We went back to one of his mates and drank. Then I ate half my wrap and passed out on the sofa. I was tired, man. Cheers for hosting, Sonny. The best croissant in Ivry, according to Sonny, started my day well. Industrial estates quickly gave way to more wheat fields, and I stopped at one to mostly finish my French taco. The day was spent on quiet roads and amazing, sleepy French villages. I stopped for a while to explore this one, then, before I knew it, I was making my way into Versailles. I was staying with a friend, a gendarme, and he basically lives on a military base. My stay with a Frenchman, of course, consisted mostly of great food. I spent a lazy day trying to repair my phone and my tent and exploring Versailles. We missed entry to the palace, so decided to go tomorrow, and instead spent the afternoon buying a bike for Thomas, from a Brit who'd cycled there from London. At last we got into the palace, and it was a sight to see. The wealth and opulence was almost sickening. This fountain was cool though. This is the Hall of Mirrors, where they signed the Treaty of Versailles. Pretty cool. After leaving the palace and saying goodbye to Thomas, I was off towards Paris at last. This would have been a nice cycle, except I dropped my phone, broke my screen, and lost access to all my money. I had to race through the capital to get to an Apple store in time, so I only got a glancing view of the Eiffel Tower. They did fix it though. After retrieving my phone and a nice meal, I took a slight detour on the way to the hostel. Capital 1 down. The hostel would be my last human contact for a while, so I partied hard that night. Footage lost. I woke hungover. I sped out of Paris by canals and river paths, stopping at one to have lunch. I've been asked what I packed. Not much. I had one spare of each item of clothing, except for socks, etc., a sleep mat, sleeping bag, tent, bike tools, wash stuff, first aid kit, documents, electronics, a book, a journal, water, and whatever food I found that day. It was hot, and as I rested in the shade of this war memorial, it inspired me to visit a nearby war museum. It'd be cold in there. It was getting late when I left, and I still had 60 kilometers to go. I stopped around 5 to finish my baguette. I was now entering Champagne country, and the ups and downs of hills were becoming more frequent.
That was a bit of a hill.
I got to the campsite at 9:15. They were closed, but I set up anyway. Then I crossed the river for a pint. I crossed the river again in the morning for a croissant. My camelback started leaking and my shirt got soaked. This problem never really went away. I continued down the Marne Valley, following a frequented river cycle route. Today I finally felt like I was doing it right, but rain clouds were gathering. I found shelter in this riverside village fete. I got a paella and, of course, champagne. As I continued, the rain gradually eased. I passed more cool, old, dilapidated ruins and arrived at the campsite at 6:30. I asked if they did food. They didn't, but they made me some anyway. Lots, in fact. That was a nice end to a nice day. The most tiring day so far. Got up at 8 and cycled into town, where I got cash and a huge Swiss pastry. My shoes were still wet from yesterday, so I cycled in flip-flops for a bit. I cycled along canals and rivers for a while, until I came to Lac Gudère, where I stopped and went for a swim. I showered the lake water off and was on my way. I was determined to reach Strasbourg in only 2 days, mainly to give my clothes a good wash. After hours of exertion, the canal pass gave way to shallow, rolling hills. I felt I was getting into Germanic territory at last. I searched several churchyards for water, without luck. I ended up stealing some from outside a closed restaurant. As the day wore on, I found myself getting more and more tired. I didn't even know where I was going to sleep. Eventually, I descended to Val-Gueuleurs, a beautiful little town with some associations with Joan of Arc, which they're very proud of. It was already 8:30, and the only place open was a kebab shop. I stopped and got the best beer and burger of my entire life. I told the shop owner what I was up to. He was very impressed. By the time I left, it was 9:30 and the sun was setting. I still didn't know where I was sleeping. I looked for a green patch on the map and took a detour along a path. Eventually it grew too dark, and after having my path blocked by a wild boar, I chose a spot by the path and set up my tent. I set off in search of breakfast, passing a few baby wild boars. Strasbourg was still 200 kilometers away. Maybe that was too ambitious. Breakfast acquired, I continued on my way. I stopped for lunch in a Spanish-owned diner, so I was able to use that language for the only time of the trip. The customer was very impressed with my journey and insisted on getting a photo of me and my bike by his car. This is the cathedral in St. Nicholas de Port. It was quite staggering.
Big old building.
The cyclone canal paths continue for hours. I passed lizards, rabbits, deer and factories. At one point it started to rain and I couldn't be bothered to put my coat on. I reached a wooded valley full of ruins, which I learnt was the Lorraine region, and soon I was in Alsace itself. The campsite was the best one yet, though I had a wet night in store. I wrote my journal under a treehouse, then went to bed. Long day today. I woke at 7 and took a detour to explore a nearby fort. The viewpoints were blocked off by fences, but I was alone, so... My beeline had taken me directly up a hill through a wood, and I'd had to abandon my bike halfway and lock it to a tree. After a bumpy trail back, I got another French breakfast. More canal riding today, and before I knew it, at 3, I'd arrived in Strasbourg, my first proper city since Paris. I checked into my hostel, washed my clothes, then took a walk over to Germany.
France. Germany.
I found a student party on the German riverbank and managed to wrangle a beer. Then it was back to France for food. I met a couple of guys at a bar who suggested I go drinking by the canal. Strasbourg is a beautiful city at dusk.
Goodbye, France. Hello, Germany.
After I crossed the bridge, I decided to turn right rather than straight on, committing to crossing the Alps once and for all. A recent storm had felled several large trees along the path.
This is not helpful.
I was following the course of the Rhine. It felt so good to be in a new country at last. For hours I followed the bottom of a beautiful wide valley. Wooded hills sloped away on either side, and the vista was long and green, punctuated by fields, train tracks and vineyards. And the occasional Lidl. This shop turned into my main source of sustenance for the whole trip. It's amazing how far a little croissant will get you. I stopped in this walled town for my first German pint. Then it was off up steep hills and through more towns. Once again, I hadn't decided where I was going to sleep tonight. I saw Rottweil on the map and thought it sounded cool, so I headed there. I reached it at 6:45 and had a filling meal of pork, mushrooms and German noodle. I plan to camp by the ice pack tonight, if I can find it. There was a campsite, but my path was blocked by another fallen tree, so I just set up here.
Might go for a swim.
I guess this wild camping spot I found wasn't actually that wild. Hopefully no one saw me. I have heard voices in the distance, but I think it might be in my head. People bitten on the neck by that bastard. A caterpillar? It really fucking hurts. I was up at 7 in search of breakfast. It always hits different after wild camping. A lot of the morning was spent in uninspiring towns and slowly climbing hills. I guess the Alps were approaching. Eventually I topped a rise and there was a vista, with the vague distant forms of what I can only assume are alpine foothill. That cheered me up no end. From then on it was downhill to Lake Constance, where vineyards and orchards crowded the shore. There was room at the third campsite I stopped at.
Me and Lake Constance.
That's Germany over there. Over that way, should be on that hill. It's Switzerland, where I may or may not be going. We'll plan that tonight.
And the lake.
gonna get a B. This was my first taste of cola ice. Half beer, half Coca-Cola. The jury is still out. It was a relaxing evening by the lake. I should put on my bug spray, but it's so far away. I decided to cross from the south to the north shore of the lake by ferry at Constance, so I could avoid going to Switzerland and could just go to Austria. The water was even more blue in real life. After days alone on the road, it felt weird to be surrounded by so many cyclists. I cycled on, the hills and vineyards on one side and the lake on the other. Around midday, I stopped for lunch by the lake and met a couple of German guys who were cycling to Monaco. We kept in touch for the whole trip. I reached the campsite at 3:50, an early stop for me. There I met a fellow Brit, also called Max, who went for pizza. After that, we went to a free reggae show by the lake shore. I felt like I was in Jamaica. Austria tomorrow. Journal entry for July 16th. Got up around 8. Bought a strange pastry, which I ate by the lake, and a pretzel, which I packed. I followed the lake for a little while, very soon entering Austria. This was the first country of the trip I'd never visited before. The path was relatively flat and followed the Rhine. At some point, I inadvertently entered Switzerland and cycled on the Swiss side of the river for a while. I think I'm in Switzerland. I think that's Austria. I'm not sure, it's very confusing. Liechtenstein over there. Might pop in, might not. That's Europe. Shortly before re-entering Austria, I stopped and ate my pretzel. Here, I missed the opportunity to go to Liechtenstein by cycling just a little further down the riverbank. I regret this now. Eventually, the path wound up more into the hills. Around 1:45, I came upon a very blue lake and seriously contemplated swimming. It was hot. I had, however, spent the morning drying up my towel and swimmers on the back of my bike, which had been wet from yesterday's rain. And I'm running on the sun cream, essential for a ginger. I dipped my feet in instead. I continued up into the Alps. Up in the Alps, it's been quite easy so far, to be honest. Knock on wood, I think it's supposed to get harder later. But I've done about 100 kilometres today. I'm going to look for a campsite soon, but I also need somewhere to eat. Food. So we'll see if there's any restaurants about. Yeah, I'm sure there will be. The landscape alternated between beautiful green woods, grass and lakes, and built up towns and ski resorts. In one of these, I stopped to examine a vending machine which contained only cheese and salami. I was tempted to buy, but the sight of a dead fly persuaded me against it. I set my tent up under a tree and walked 20 minutes to a nearby restaurant where I am now. I ate schnitzel with chips, some kind of fried apple dessert, and drank a couple of beers. Not a bad day. I went back to the campsite, drew a picture of the view, then went to sleep. The day started by Beeline guiding me away from the road onto impassable hiking trails and uncrossable skinny bridges. Eventually, I ignored its beeping and navigated on my own, but this would be a theme for the day. At last, I found myself climbing a steep but tarmac path up into the hills. I stopped to eat a pretzel and cool off as my body was soaked with sweat. A bit more difficult cycling today. My Beeline keeps taking me on routes which don't exist, so I'm having to navigate by myself. Nice view though. Damn. I continued on up, cycling and wheeling in equal measure. Bloody hot. Not quite 30 degrees, but feels like when you're cycling up a mountain. I plan to do 80k today, and I think it's probably not going to happen. But we'll see how much downhill there is. When I reached the top, I was at the beautiful blue lake and campsite I'd almost made it to the day before. It looked like a nice place to camp, but I definitely wouldn't have made it in the shape I was in yesterday. I zoomed down the other side as civilization drifted away and the mountains grew more magnificent, listening to music and in high spirits. Just before I started to climb again, I stopped on a shady bench and ate some bread and cheese. As I cleaned my knife, I sliced my finger deep. Hopefully the wound isn't full of blue cheese. After that came the start of another climb. That was hours ago. The climb hasn't ended yet. I need to find some water. This is really stupid.
There's a mountain stream. Seems safe enough. It's clear enough.
I felt the air get thinner, and I can now see snow not so far away. I passed horses, cows, hikers, and bikers. It's 4:30 and I've barely covered 40 kilometres. Maybe going downhill will be faster, if I ever do. I'm currently in Switzerland again. I simply can't avoid the place. After having a Coke in that pub, the beeline curse returned. The path just stopped. A helpful man advised me to go back the way I'd come, so I did. An unlucky P-brake led to me stepping into someone's drainage ditch while holding onto an electric fence. Ouch. My shoes never recovered, nor did my pride. It's amazing how much faster you go going downhill on tarmac. An hour of smooth cycling got me to the campsite around 7. I got the last free patch of grass available. I went out for a pizza and a beer by the side of a busy road. That's where I am now, killing my lungs with the fumes. Ah well, at least it's hot. Today was defined by water, both above, below, and in my shoes. There's an earwig on the ceiling. Got up at 6, dried my tent and set out. Most of the morning was spent following the in-river on gravelly cycle paths. My shoes hadn't dried from yesterday's ditch incident, so for a while I cycled in flip-flops. Eventually I bit the bullet and put my shoes on, 1 foot sockless. I found I was following the Via Claudia Augusta, the old Roman route across the Reschen Pass and the border with Switzerland. I crossed the river back into Austria at a castle. After struggling up to the road, I found a sign telling me I couldn't go to Italy this way. I found an alternate commute route, so crossed back into Switzerland again, for the last time, I swear. The next section was amazing, but I took very little footage. I ate an Oreo ice cream sandwich to fuel me for the climb, then crossed back into Austria. The climb was long and hot, but winding, so nowhere near as difficult as yesterday. At 2, I reached the top, only 1,415 metres. I stopped to eat the last of my bread and cheese, before continuing across the Italian border to Reschen Sea, where thunder and lightning were gathering. I sheltered under a barn roof and waited for the worst to pass. On I went, rain still soaking from my shoes and coat, but I'd almost reached what I'd come this way for. It was to see the submerged church of this flooded town. This was done on purpose in the 40s and 50s to provide hydroelectric power. The rain mostly slackened after this, and the rest of the day was delightfully, mercifully, and almost without exception, downhill. I soared down cycle paths, through woods, past lakes, homes, and churches. Orchards and apricot groves opened up on either side as I got low. I really am in Italy, but people still seem to be speaking German. Just after 6, I stopped at the campsite, set up my tent, showered, and got a beer, and realised I'd lost my charging adapter. Shit. I went for a pizza, which was quite soggy, then to bed, which, due to rolling onto my camelback, was as soggy as the pizza. I slept eventually. I was woken at 7 by about 5 different church bells clanging one after the other. I got an apple tea from a local bakery. Lots of apples out here. Around 9:45 I was off, freewheeling downhill towards clouds and sunrise, past orchards on either side. I stopped at a small honesty stand, selling fruit and apple juice. I bought some of both. I was aiming for Bolzano, where I'd managed to arrange a warm shower to host. Warm showers is just couch surfing for bike packers. I only managed to use this once this trip. The day was full of bouts of heavy rain. After a cafe stop and a pannier mishap, I carried on down the pass, letting myself dry out in the air. Eventually, I arrived at a giant pair of seats overlooking Murano. I was ahead of schedule, so I took a detour and spent 3 hours looking around the spectacular botanical gardens of Trautmannsdorf. Suddenly I'm in Japan. There are plants from all over the globe, as well as a terrarium, and several viewing platforms of the castle and valley. Taking a little look around this place. It's not too bad, to be honest. Nice gardens, nice view. beautiful sunny weather most of the time, but at one point an intense thunderstorm rolled in again and I had to flee back up a bank for shelter. I finished in the gardens around 5, well worth a visit, the castle itself less so, and got on my sodden bike, having to remove the gel seat to dry it. The loss of an inch of height made the rest of my cycle somewhat difficult. Around 6 I rolled into Bolzano. The old town is amazing, just what you'd expect from Germanic Italy. Cobbles, colourful buildings and street food. Stefano lives right in the middle of it. There was another bikepacker there, also called Max. Had I been there a day earlier, I would have also met one, called Max. I'm maxed out. I helped Stefano prepare dinner. He didn't provide much, only bread, cheese, prosciutto with melon, sauerkraut bread, pasta with tomato and garlic, a huge salad, 4 beers, donuts and another dessert. We chatted late into the night. I've missed company, and a roof, and a bed. Hopefully there's more to come. I went to see the 5,000-year-old body of Otzi the Iceman, who'd been mummified in a nearby glacier. It was very interesting, but it did make me think about death. An explore and a mango gelato later, I was off towards Trento. Max joined me for the first and easiest half of my cycle. We chatted as the landscapes rolled by, getting more and more spectacular. It felt different to cycle with company. Nice though. At 34 kilometres we stopped, had lunch and said our goodbyes. For the next 20 kilometres there was a stubborn headwind and the going was slow. I got to Trento around 5 and decided to continue to a nearby campsite, not willing to risk pitching up in the endless orchards I passed as the sun grew low in the sky. For the first time in a while I left the main path and climbed into the hills, reaching the campsite at 8:10. I put up my tent, showered, then headed back down the hill to a pizzeria, where a pint and a pizza ended a pleasant day. I woke at 8 and set off for Verona via Lake Garda. Before long I'd wound through the hills to the lake, which is surrounded by spectacular towering cliffs. I wove through the town heading towards the east shore of the lake, having to stop to wait out one of the many thunderstorms of the day. Soon I was climbing the hills on an extremely serpentine path. Thunder continued as I climbed, and lightning struck the lake right in front of me. Once again, at the top, I reached a beeline path that didn't exist. Shit. I resolved to take the other shore. These roads were busy and fast, so I cycled fast too. In one tunnel, to avoid the traffic, I moved onto a metal walkway overhanging the lake. There was not much friction, and a poorly timed break later, I was skidding into the road, almost hitting a pillar and a truck. This was my first proper fall of the trip, and luckily I ended up with only a few scratches and a broken derailleur. It was also lucky I was only a 20-minute cycle away from a friendly bike repair shop. This was not as chill a day as yesterday. Despite my fall, the next 70 kilometres were done at a breakneck speed. I was desperate to reach Verona before dark. The only exception was when I stopped for 10 minutes to take a dip in the lake. I arrived at my Verona hotel at 9:30, just as the sun set. You need to sort your drains out. After checking into my hotel, I ended up at a buzzing bar with live music and the best pastrami burger I've ever tasted. It was a nice end to what had been a very long and hard day, but those ones are always the most memorable. I spent a while exploring the centre of Verona. It looked like a cool city, complete with a stunning arena, and I was sad not to see more of it, but I couldn't wait around today. I'd received a text from my brother who was interrailing, saying he and a friend would be in Venice tonight. The appeal of a familiar face was too much, so I had to get a shift on. The cycle out of the city was uninspiring. The most noteworthy thing was the steadily increasing noise of cicadas, which I insisted on calling crocuses. These crocuses be crocusing. This noise would be an almost constant companion for the next month or so. After leaving the suburban industrial estates, I found myself, for the whole morning, climbing up and down a surprising amount of hills. I also saw some of the biggest vineyards I've yet seen. It seems the Italians have vineyards in place of fields. The cicadas are particularly loud in these places. Soon the hills with their vineyards, narrow towns and crumbling abandoned buildings were left behind. In the second 70 kilometres of the day I was on flat, straight cycle paths through forests and modern towns. To get into Venice I had to wheel my bike down wooden ramps, under a train track and up the other side. Once through I was cycling over the bridge towards Venice. The city is technically in a lagoon, but I still feel as though I've now made it from sea to sea. I arrived at the city proper around 6:50. Bikes are banned here, so for once I left it safely locked to the edge of town and set off for the hotel on foot. Each subsequent street was the thinnest I'd ever seen, and each canal was the most beautiful I'd ever seen. This is a city untouched by the car. It's honestly incredible. The Eventually I got near to the hotel, where I waited for my brother, who was late, and had a couple of pints. They arrived at last around 9. We went straight to a nearby pasta restaurant and got spaghetti vongole, a Venetian staple. It was so nice to hang out with people I knew. Afterwards we found ourselves in a square, where two bands were competing over who could play movie soundtracks the loudest. A couple of bars later and I was feeling somewhat drunk. Cycling has destroyed my tolerance. And going back to the hotel, I simply walked in, set up my bed on the floor, and fell asleep. Ben left the hotel at 5:30. At 8 I took the ferry to meet him by the station. He revealed he'd missed his train, and we had breakfast together. I spent the day exploring Venice, including San Marco Square, a couple of museums, and the Doge's Palace. It was as sumptuous as Versailles, though on a smaller scale. Golden and painted ceilings and walls were the highlights. The armory too was a sight to see. So many suits of armour, huge swords, bows and other weapons. Pretty cool. I felt very cultured. I wandered back to my hostel, napped, and chatted to the woman I was sharing a room with. We then went our separate ways to find dinner. I chose a restaurant by the lagoon, so did she. It was a pleasant dinner.
All alone in Venice. Not sure exactly where I'm going, just wandering about down alleyways.
I wandered the nighttime streets for a few hours, getting lost among the canals, then, at last, returned to the hostel and slept. A restful, well-needed day. Back to the road tomorrow. Up and out at 8:30, but slowed down by the discovery of my first flat tyre. I replaced the inner tube without checking the outer one. I think this might have been a mistake. Tomorrow will tell. The day was flat and mostly urban, so I didn't record much. I did, however, reach the first sign of Euroville 8, which I've been aiming for the whole time.
So I've made it to the Adriatic. Not at the most picturesque point, but Adriatic nonetheless. Obviously I've already seen the Venetian lagoon, but that doesn't really count. So I've cycled successfully from English Channel to Adriatic, which is an achievement in itself. And I'm going to go put my foot in the water and then maybe go for a swim. Good to have made it.
My first sea swim as a cycle made up for the drizzle and pavement of the day.
There we go.
The Adriatic was warm and salty. I'm not used to that as a Brit. After a pretty decent carbonara, I went down to the beach and read my book for a bit. It was windy and I had to save an inflatable lilo from being blown into the sea. Up at 8, and after waiting for ages to get my passport back, out at 10. Around 12 it started to rain, then it started to rain, thunder and lightning as usual. I stopped to shelter near a wine and food place and they beckoned me in. I'm worried my new inner tube has a slow puncture in it, albeit very slow. It holds up alright, maybe it's in my head. I'm still following Eurovelo 8, and despite how flat it is, the cycling's been more interesting today. I can once again see mountains in the distance.
This part of Italy is too flat. It's getting tiring just cycling all flat for 200 kilometres. Got 45k left to go today. Feeling more tired than I'd expect. But warm bed waiting for me, so I'll be alright.
The parents of a university friend had very kindly offered to host me in Trieste. Miles and miles of slight uphill were suddenly followed by very, very steep downhill into Trieste. It became clear to me here that I hadn't fixed my squeaking brakes. Trieste is an extremely pretty city, good cycling infrastructure too. I arrived at my friend's parents at 6 precisely. They gave me a warm welcome and a warm pizza, and then lots of alcohol, good old Italy. Socialising and a warm bed were a great way to round out Italy. But what really energised me for what came next was the dog Tia. I'd been warned she was very friendly. Tomorrow, at last, I'd leave Italy for the Balkans. Woke to find that my tyre had deflated again. After a huge breakfast and some goodbyes, I decided to try and fix it in this square with the help of an enthusiastic old Italian man who didn't speak a word of English. I discovered this thorn, removed it, patched it up and assumed I was done. Then it was off along confusing paths towards Slovenia. I reached it at 12:30, the first new country in over a week. My excitement was, however, tempered by the realisation that my tyre was still deflating, perhaps even faster than before. I noticed a nearby bike shop and decided to just buy a new inner tube. I got one from the second shop I tried and removed several thorns from the outer tyre. Problem solved. As I was retightening the axle, I snapped it. I could have cried. The fourth bike shop I tried had a spare one. I almost did cry. Tyres finally firm for the first time in days. I zoomed along the sadly short-lived coastline, tunnels and countryside of Slovenia.
Ominous.
By the time I reached Croatia, it was 5:20, very late. I cycled unnecessarily uphill for a way, then back down and along the coast.
Should I grab onto the back? I'm thinking about it.
I followed the coast until 8 when I stopped at a campsite. They said I didn't even need to pay.
In Croatia at last. Got a campsite where they're not making me pay. Not much of a beach, but let's see. Sunset. Stuff.
I watched the sunset and the thunderstorms in the distance over the blue sea. Later the rain rolled in and I sheltered from it in a restaurant. I'm liking Croatia so far. Up around 8 and off at 9. I decided against cross country. Pula looked nice. 60% of today was spent weaving through pedestrians on coastal paths, and the other 40% cycling on loose dirt and gravel through woods. Still, it was a lovely day. No rain at all. Outdoors, downhill, exercise, sunlight and music are great serotonin boosters, but it's now been more than 3 weeks since I last interacted with someone for more than one evening in a row. Solitude is refreshing, but you can get tired of it. I hope now I've reached the coast there'll be more hostels. I'd like to meet some people. I cycled past too many beautiful beaches with clear, bright blue water to count.
Starting to get a bit hotter. Just past some cactus and cycling most of the day on dirt tracks. Things like this. Let's have a fire there. Missed that luckily. Vegetation about. Feeling very foreign at last.
The landscape certainly feels different here. The coast is rocky and the mud is a deep clay red. Around 4 I stopped in a small bay and went for a very salty but refreshing swim. A few more pedals brought me past the amphitheatre and to the hostel around 5:30. The hostel I checked into was once again not very social. Everyone was silent. I really had to stop doing that. I went for food and a solo walk around town where I found a lively square. I chilled there for a while before heading home to sleep. "22 days ago, when I was in Versailles, my gendarme friend had given me 3 French military rations. Today I finally ate my first one. It was good. I cycled out of town, aiming for Rijeka, past signs of Croatia's communist past. Most of the morning was spent on gravel paths through green and brown pine forests, climbing up hills in the steadily growing heat. It certainly feels different here, drier, than the greenness of France, the Alps and northern Italy.
So this is the classic type of road I've been on today and most of yesterday. Pretty. Quite difficult to cycle up, which is what I've been doing for the last half hour. I'm quite sweaty. Nice pine trees. Just wanted to take a record of my struggles. See when they get wildfires.
I cycled inland for a bit, then back out towards the coast. Around 1 I descended a steep road down to a river, which widened into a harbour. There I stopped to refuel, which for me was crisps and Pepsi. After that, it was back to climbing.
Climb. A bit hot. Just ran out of water. Time to get Pepsi, so to find somewhere to fill up. Beautiful scenery. I think it's the sweatiest I've been so far. Looking forward to many more moments like this to come in the Balkans. Bloody hell.
Soon the gravel shifted into tarmac. So far, I've been navigating using Beeline's routing. This worked okay in Western Europe, but not in the Balkans, so I downloaded GPX routes of Eurovelo 8, which came in sections. I picked up some snacks from Lidl and found a place to stop. I'd started this trip partly to lose weight, but I think my belly will come back at this point.
Heading down to the coast now. Hopefully it's mostly downhill, though I think I've got a bit left to go. Onto Rijeka, where I've got a hostel. Stopping for some food.
Soon I was confronted with the view of Rijeka, still apparently 30 kilometres away around the coast. Most of it was downhill. Heaven. I put on some music and for 30 minutes sped down the smooth tarmac with a wooden cliff to my left and the sea to my right. When I think back now, this is one of my happiest moments of the whole trip. I cycled one-handed filming, and sometimes no-handed, with nothing between me and a steep drop to the sea, except for a low stone wall full of gaps. I arrived at the hostel by the sea at 7. And a friendly roommate lent me his goggles. Swim time. In a sign of what was to come, I'd connected with some fellow travellers through the Hostel World app, and we'd arranged to go to dinner together. They were all Dutch but spoke perfect English. I got a stingray pasta. Then we went and got drunk. We found a nightclub and a beach cave. I like Rijeka. Today I was happy. Hungover from the night before, I spent the day exploring Rijeka. I spied a castle atop a hill and climbed endless flights of stairs in the oppressive heat. At the top, sweat streamed off me. It seemed to be my perpetual state these days. The castle itself wasn't up to much, but it was worth it for the view. Off in the distance were the hills I'll be climbing tomorrow. Then it was off to explore Rijeka beaches, which are really just rocky coves. Then I was joined by the Dutch people I got drunk with the night before, and we tried to watch the sunset. After burgers and a couple of beers, I went home early, ready to get cycling the next day. I cycled today without my padded seat, as it had got soaked in a thunderstorm the night before, and I'd ripped it trying to dry it out. The morning was spent climbing tarmac roads, with occasional stretches of relieving downhills. The scenery has been getting spectacular. Always the blue sea is on the right, and the sparse, piney, rocky landscape stretch out in either direction.
Sparse, isn't it?
I don't know where I'm sleeping tonight, and it doesn't look promising for wild camping, being so steep. At 2:15, 60 kilometres in, I stopped in a cafe, got a flat coat with something floating in it.
It's getting pretty windy up here, with these trees sloping over. Cool place to camp though, but I found more like this.
I also found a nice phone lying in the road, put it in a sealable plastic bag and sent a photo of it to the first WhatsApp number on it. Hopefully someone finds it. At this viewpoint I stopped and had lunch. I also found some curious metal tubing in a bin, which I picked up and later used to fix my tent. Much later. The empty landscape made for incredible views, but I did run out of water and had to crash a German family's holiday house, and they kindly gave me some. At 7 o'clock I found this view and decided to set up camp in a forest.
Wild camping again. This is the tent. And over here is a nice view. If I can get there in time. I had no dinner, but I'm just going to eat some crisps and drink some Coke. Have a look at the view. I've set up camp for the night. Wild camping again. Got this view to eat my crisps in. And there's a place I can get breakfast not too far away tomorrow. I've got plenty of water, so yeah, pretty good. How are you?
I sat, read my book and watched the sunset over the sea. Just watching the last of the sunset. It's very beautiful, but oh well. I sometimes think the immediate aftermath of the sunset is more beautiful than the sunset itself. What do you think? I'd set an alarm for 5:30, but the mossy floor of the forest was so comfortable that I slept until 8. Today I cycled 3.5 stages of the route I'd downloaded. I spent hours cycling through valleys and farmland filled with hay, sheep, horses and barking dogs. Some ran after me behind fences, some only for a short while. Others pursued for half a kilometre and came close to catching up. I pedalled fast. This was a taste of things to come. Soon the fences would disappear, but the barking, chasing dogs would not. I encountered cattle in the road and yelling farmhands. I set my sights on a campsite in hope of a shower and food. Spot check on my current state. My legs are finally tiring. It hurts when I sit on the saddle, which is now held together by climbing tape. Parts of the bell on the bike have broken off and I have to hit it with my key to get it to work. Both my spare inner tubes are still punctured, my front brakes still squeak, and my front wheel is held on by an old quick release skewer. And I'm having to wear gloves because my hands are losing feeling. However, aside from these niggling issues, all is good. Greece seems both near and far away. The arduous morning of climbing over a mountain ridge was mostly made up for by what came after. A vast vista of distant mountains and semi-arid hills. I zoomed down a tarmac road alongside it for many kilometres, revelling in the sun and breeze.
Cycling down this road with a huge vista over there. Not get distracted so I don't hit any cars, but it's pretty spectacular. Just wanted to show that I'm here.
When I reached the bottom, I finally saw a sign once again for Eurovelo 8. This route took me up through shallow hills through a semi-desert shrubbery, dust and dirt. The heat was intense and I had to drink a lot of water, but I felt like I was on a real adventure. This felt foreign and dangerous even. I can't believe I cycled here from my house. By 1:30 I'd made it back to the sea. And by 3:30 I was in Zadar. It's a spectacular town, full of old ruins just lying in the street. I explored for a while, and as sunset approached, I headed to the Greeting to the Sun, where I was to meet someone I'd again got in touch with through the Hostelworld app. She arrived and we watched the sunset to the sound of a nearby music concert and kids jumping into the sea. After that we went for food, burgers again. Zadar was fun, wish I'd spent more than one night there. Today I took a ferry away from the Croatian mainland and headed to an island which runs parallel to the coast. The cycling was easy and beautiful. It felt odd to see the sea to my left for once. It made me feel like I was going north. At 11:30 I stopped at a spot full of cactus and palm trees, all to myself. Just been for a nice swim here. Sand underfoot, which makes a nice change from all the stones of Croatia. There's fucking cactuses here. It's very odd to think that I cycled here from my house, albeit with a couple of ferries, but still. Mainland Croatia over there. Head back there in a sec. Gonna be a close one to make it to Greece, I think, but I think we'll do it. After a quick beer in a low-key ferry port, I crossed back over to the mainland. I cycled a long way along dirt paths through miles of jumbled rock walls and sea views. It felt good to be away from the main roads and out in the dusty countryside.
Hot. Coming off this dirt track, which I've been on for like a few kilometres, and I keep getting hit by grasshoppers or whatever you can hear. I had like 8 or 9 jump into my face, or into my neck mainly. So that's been fun. Good time.
At times when I'd stop at hostels, I would feel like I was missing out on all the experiences that interrailers and normal tourists were having. And it was sad to have to move at such a speed. But they didn't get to see all this, to spend all day in the sun, to stop wherever shade allowed, to be completely non-dependent on anyone but yourself, to rock up into town through the suburbs and back alleyways. I got into town at 6:30 and went for a great dinner with a Californian. When I was back at the hostel, I met a German who was walking across Europe. That made me feel lazy. I spent the morning cycling through the remains of a wildfire. The climb was grueling in the cloying Croatian heat, but a Fanta and Doritos got me to the top. Signs of fires pursued me for kilometres. Now all the no camping signs make sense. Eventually I made it back down to the incredibly blue sea. The cycling to Split involved skirting an active airfield and following a rocky path through lots of ancient Roman ruins. The centre of Split is formed from the ruins of the palace of the Roman Emperor Diocletian. The hostel I'd booked was right next to it, and waiting for me there was a familiar face. I'd last seen my brother 10 days ago, in Venice. I showered, and then we went out to explore and for food with one of Ben's Interrail friends. Ben was feeling ill, having drank water pumped out of the ground at a graveyard. Poor guy. We drank a bit, and in the end it was me that was sick that night. I awoke to a terrible headache and few memories of the previous night. At 1 I got my bike from where it was locked inside a fruit stand. I went in search of this hostel I'd booked. It turned out to be someone's apartment and a big scam. Met a few other travellers there. All were angry, but there was nowhere else to go. I spent the day exploring and went first to a built-up party beach. I didn't care much for it, but on the way to leave, I found a much nicer one round the corner. There I sat, swam, relaxed, watched the sunset and jumped off a few rocks. Once I was back in the centre of Split, I found out it was Victory Day in Croatia. I got some food, explored the nighttime streets, then went back to the hostel. I slept to the sound of irate guests and angry old women who'd been made to sleep on the kitchen floor. Wet and stress are the 2 words that sum up today. The rain began to pour and I tried to shelter under a sloped tree trunk. Everything I owned got soaked through. During a gap in the rain I made a run for it, but I got caught out again and had to walk my bike through a literal river until I found shelter in a nearby cafe. Here an Australian-Croatian lad who owned the place got talking to me and ran to his house to donate me sealable plastic bags and an umbrella. I was very grateful. Here I also found that water had got inside my electronics bag and all of them were waterlogged. I continued on my southern way, cycling through epic hills, under bridges and through quaint towns. The roads became very serpentine, both up and down, and I soon found these conditions in rain don't mix. The fall was painful, but only resulted in a few cuts and scrapes and no obvious damage to the bike. After many kilometres of ups and downs, I soon found myself at Brela, which I've been told about. It was a spectacularly pretty beach and the sun came out, so I stopped to have a swim. The soaking in the fall had caused me to book a nice hotel for that night. I was looking for luxury.
Very nice.
Then I found my portable charger and my cable weren't working. My phone was almost dead. Shit. I cycled down possibly the most pretty part of the cycle so far. I photographed none of it. I had to save battery. By a miracle my charger worked for just a moment, enough to get me to the hotel. I hung my cable up to dry, got a tuna steak and a beer to cheer me up. Stressful day. I woke very early today. I'd planned to do 180 kilometres, including catching a ferry 60 kilometres away. The internet had told me it left at 10:20, and my navigation system told me I'd be there at 11:30. So I got a shift on, keeping to the main roads and aiming to shave over an hour off. I got to the ferry port at 9:45, but they told me the next ferry wasn't until 12:30. The ferry was supposed to take me to Ireland, so I could skip crossing into this bit of Bosnia, which sticks out into the Croatian coast. I didn't want to wait, so I decided to just set my beeline for Dubrovnik, follow whichever route it gave me, and cross any borders when I got to them. Right off from the last bout of rain, which is striking me in the coast of Croatia. This one's coming up, so fantastic. I followed my beeline blindly up into the hills. The countryside grew more remote, but I didn't really notice as I was paying attention to the thunderstorm that never materialised. The scenery was incredible. As signs of civilization drifted away, I wondered when signs of a manned border crossing would appear.
Avoided the rain so far. Still there.
Then I was climbing endlessly into the mountains, and my data began to peter out. I stopped at the top near an old church and assessed my options. I decided to continue on down the road. Bosnia had to be around here somewhere. Situation update. It's raining, but that's not the main thing. I may have illegally crossed into Bosnia, gone through Bosnia, been stopped by the police, been searched, fined, ticketed, had my details taken. So how did we end up here? Difficult cycle this. I feel like I'm on an epic quest to cross Bosnia, which I am in, it seems. All mountains. When I got to the border of Bosnia, there was barely a signpost, just a flimsy car barrier over a path leading into a farmer's field. My data wasn't working, and my only other option was a 2-hour detour back over a mountain. So I just went through. This is the route I took through Bosnia. I was there for an hour and saw one person, one car, and one dog. Soon the border of Croatia approached again, unmanned, and I felt like I'd gotten away with it. Somehow I didn't notice the camera. Being from Bosnia, lovely country, all mountains like this. Didn't get passport checked on the way in, all the way out. It was just a barrier across a road which I went through. So I guess, is that against international law? I may be a criminal now. But I made it. Got away with it. Purely got away with it. I carried on, feeling gleeful and smart. I rejoined paved roads, and that's where I saw the first car in a while, a police van. They pulled up and rolled down the window. Passport, you crossed the border. You'll follow us. They drove off out of sight and I caught them down the road. They had me waiting in the rain while they searched me for drugs and smoked cigarettes. I was glad now that I'd borrowed that umbrella. After an hour, an unmarked car pulled up and I paid the hefty fine on my card. They gave me the ticket, slammed the door and left. I didn't want to have to cycle around again. It's my bloody bike routing thing. Now, after taking a moment to recover, I carried on towards Dubrovnik, just glad I wasn't deported. The last damp 40 kilometers dragged by. Today was being longer than expected, but at least the sun came out. I again generally ignored the beeline route and kept to the fast coastal roads. At one point it took me away from the main road, up a long gravel path, past an angry dog. I stopped and walked as you're supposed to in those situations, but when I got to the end of the path, I found this. I went back, past a confused and even angrier dog, and eventually rejoined the main road. This is what the landside looked like from the other side. I put on the Game of Thrones soundtrack as Dubrovnik finally approached. I wheeled through the steep streets and locked my bike outside the old town. I went for food and an explore with a couple of people from my room. One of them kindly gave me his charging adapter to keep.
Wow.
Mine had been destroyed by water damage.
It's like I'm in Game of Thrones. I've been craving it the whole time.
We did a circuit of the inner city walls and saw many cats. Then we visited a couple of waterside bars, but alcohol in Dubrovnik is insanely expensive. It was a stressful day, but it ended well. And now I have a story. I spent a lazy morning exploring the new and old towns of Dubrovnik. On my cycle out of the city, I finally got the Game of Thrones view I've been looking for. The weather was incredible as I cycled towards the Montenegro border. It was just so nice to cycle in dry shoes again, even if I had to retrieve them from the bin where room service had thrown them. I cycled through a valley full of Mediterranean cypresses, then approached my first proper legal border crossing of the trip. I queued behind the cars and passed through without incident.
Montenegro. Yep. Definitely a mountain.
I found a campsite and had a meal by the bay. The cycling was flat and easy around the bay itself, and after navigating the traffic of Kotor, I found myself climbing slowly up a mountain. I must have climbed thousands of feet, but it never felt too hard due to the endless looping of the roads and their consequent flatness. The Bay of Kotor grew small below me, and I could soon see Croatia. Nice view. I was passed by a couple of buses of tourists in the early stages and was later caught behind them as they struggled to navigate the thin road. At one particularly long hold-up, I navigated around them and never saw them again.
Very up, right at the top yet, but it's actually been good. Quite a reasonable cycle. Boss, can't let it overtake me.
This climb continued for hours. Many passing cars beat their horns or waved out of their windows, congratulating me and urging me on. I'm cycling from over there up to here. Time for lunch, I think. A short downhill was followed by yet another serpentine climb. I took a path over a road tunnel and rounded the corner to see one of the best views of my entire life. I spent a long time admiring the views of Montenegro. The next few hours were spent following main roads, which in this country weren't that main at all. I had to keep stopping to take photos and appreciate where I was. I found what seemed to be the only town in the entire area and bought some water. Around 3 I turned off and followed a smaller road down through a valley to a river. A man laughed at me taking this video. Views like this made me feel like I'd teleported to East Asia. I got to the hostel in Podgorica around 6. It's the capital, but it's tiny. I got up at 10:30 and found myself weaving through the back streets of the capital, which backed straight onto mountains. After the endless ups and downs of yesterday, today was almost entirely flat. Montenegro is one of the most beautiful countries I've ever been to, but I had to leave it after only 2 days. Soon I found myself approaching the Albanian border. I was waved through without even having my passport checked. A friendly salesman persuaded me to buy a data SIM, which was far too big for the few days I'd be here. It seems that most of northern Albania is small towns and farms crowding around a series of main roads running north to south between rows of hills. I was following Beeline's navigation today. It kept taking me along a main road, then along obscure side roads which devolved into dirt tracks and footpaths. Eventually I decided to just follow the main road into town. I arrived at the hostel at 4:30, an early finish for me. Got chatting to some people in the lobby and we went for food. We wandered around Skoda for a while, taking in the unusual architecture of a formerly communist, now majority Muslim country. Eventually we returned to the hostel and I annihilated a pool. Then I played a game of cards with an Australian couple and a cat. Albania seems to be becoming a popular place to travel to. I can see why. I spent an hour wandering the streets of Skoda in search of affordable sun cream. I cycled out of town, past a nearby castle, and back onto the main road. This was a terrible puncture. It went through both sides of my inner tube multiple times, the dangers of cycling in the gutter. I cycled through small towns for a while, past mosques and fields, and stopped in a friendly cafe. You get these stuffed croissants all through Europe, and they became a staple of my diet. More walled-in Albanian houses passed me by. Soon I was approaching Tirana. On the way in, I was stopped by a family asking me for directions in German. Then I thought I was being stopped by the police, but they were actually waving the car behind me. Surprisingly, it was in this hostel that I met more people cycling Europe. One cyclist was actually a professional on the Kosovo team. I went out to explore Tirana. It's a really cool city with a really cool vibe. Half brutalist architecture, half modern art, sometimes combined. At this point, I was in a real rush to reach Greece. Otherwise, I would definitely have spent another night here. There are some great museums I missed out on. I ran up the steps of the Tirana pyramid onto the monument to Enver Hoxha and got a view of the city. Then I went and got some Turkish tea and kunefe, a dessert so good it inspired me to go to Turkey. I cycled out past bunkers built by the country's paranoid leader when it was a communist state. There were over 750,000 things dotted about Albania. I started at 10, which was quite late considering I'd intended to do 160k today. I passed trash fires by the road, through coastal and inland towns, and cycled on varying dirt tracks and very new smooth tarmac roads. Like yesterday, every child I passed said hello to me, every fifth car beat its horn or waved out the window, and every 10th dog gave me a half-hearted chase. The third quarter of the day took me on quiet back roads through a protected estuary area. I was going at quite a speed to make up the distance. Albania was, overall, one of the most interesting and fascinating countries I went to. I later listened to the audiobook Free by Lee Upi, all about Albanian history. Especially having heard that, I felt privileged to be able to visit.
Albania, so far, it's very flat. It's hilly as you get south.
I'd been warned about Albanian traffic and driving, but they actually have quite nice cycle infrastructure in the city themselves. And since the roads are so chaotic, people are always on the lookout for hazards like cyclists. Never once did a car overtake without first a respectful horn blast to let me know they were there, and then a wide pass which left me lots of space. Soon, as the sun set, Flora approached over the hill. I got to the hostel around 7:30, then at 8:30 met with a Belgian guide for Albanian food and beer. I planned today to be easy, only 74 kilometres. I got up late and bought some stuff from a bakery, including trelece, which a friend had recommended. I cycled out along the seafront of Vlora. Eventually I peeled off the main road onto smaller side roads which ran up into the hills. But in the distance, at last, I could see the rumoured Albanian mountains. The flat was over. The road was at times serpentine, at times just a steep gradient that climbed further and further up the mountainside, rejoining the main road and avoiding the cars which soon passed me, beeping horns and yelling words of encouragement. These increased the nearer I got to the top. Eventually I entered a pine forest. It felt almost like I was in the Alps again. Campsites and restaurants popped up on either side of the road. Tourists milled about. There were even mountain bike paths heading off down the hill. I climbed for hours, getting through almost an entire tube of Oreos. I finally reached the top at 2:45 and treated myself to pasta and Coke. The island in the distance is Corfu, my first sighting of Greece. I sped down the winding roads, glad of a rest for my legs, shivering in the breeze which blew on my sweat-soaked skin. I had to keep stopping to admire the incredible view, along with everyone else. These were always my favourite parts of the trip. Music on, speed up, views. When I reached the coast, the path went up again. I wound up and down through green trees and beautiful coastal villages. I could tell I was near Greece. I got to Himara of 5 and stopped in a nearby campsite. I set up my tent among the pines, then went for a swim in the very spiky sea. This was one of my favourite campsites. I can see why Voldemort decided to hide out in Albanian forests. I took a walk through the woods, a hole in the fence and the port to the main town. I went to a restaurant and got some great squid. I made my way back to the campsite and was kept awake till 12 by music blaring from the town. Greece tomorrow, at last. Up early, I heated the second French ration. It was decent. I stopped for snacks in town and bought 3 pastries which I ate on the beach. Today, at last, I'd finally reached Greece. I was off into the sweat-inducing early morning heat. All day the beautiful coastal roads undulated up and down, mostly up. Even my palms got sweaty. Today, shouts of encouragement from passing cars far outstripped shouts of hello from passing children, probably because I spent most of the day on main roads. The landscape, unsurprisingly, got more and more Greek-looking the further south I went. I loved Albania. It was the first country I went to which didn't use the euro. It somehow felt further away than Greece did. Soon, the border approached. But shortly before it did, I was stopped by a small boy called Dimitri, who waved me into his family cafe to shelter from the rain. I gave him 2 of my last free sweets, which I'd bought in Croatia, and €1. From there it was only 60 kilometres to the border.
Bye Albania, you've been good.
I was quickly waved out of Albania, but spent ages waiting in a long car line for Greece. I eventually realised I could just go around it. They have a distance system to everywhere else. I was through, and free-wheeled down the road, laughing out loud for joy. I'd set off aiming for Greece on the 2nd of July, and it was now the 13th of August. I'd been on the road for 43 days. I cycled another 43 kilometres into Greece, appreciating the lack of brutalist architecture.
I'm in Greece, a little bit away from the coast at the moment, but I'm heading back that way. Try and find a campsite, and then rest. It's been a tiring day. I think more tiring ones ahead, lots of mountainous landscape.
More of coastal Greece passed me by as the sun grew low in the sky. I passed the first of these mini shrines by the road, which are everywhere in Greece. Eventually I was passing through Igoumenitsa and aiming for a campsite a few kilometres on. The first wouldn't let me in, and the second gave me a spot which was essentially a parking space rather than a pitch. I sent off my tent anyway and went for beer and food. My house to Greece by bicycle accomplished. Easy peasy. I was awoken by the inordinately loud sound of a cricket creaking right by my head. It got underway at 11. As I took down my tent, it ripped on my broken pole. I really should repair that. I climbed up and down rolling hills all day, and at 2:15 stopped on a shady bench overlooking a bay with a castle and refueled myself. After that, the hills mostly stopped. I found myself down by the coast, passing along lovely long beaches and through coastal olive groves. Greece is beautiful. What a surprise. At 5, I stopped at the last option for a campsite before I headed inland around the Ambracian Gulf. I finally bodged a sturdy repair for my pole, using a length of tubing I found in a bin in Croatia. I had a beer and souvlaki in the camp restaurant, then rested. I had a long way to go tomorrow. A couple of days earlier, I noticed a friend was on holiday in Greece, just south of me. I sent her a message and she invited me to join them as I passed by. Also, a couple of days ago, I noticed my back wheel was wobbling and worried my back axle was cracked like it has in the past. Maybe it was this that made the cycling seem harder today. Or maybe it's because I had to go the long way around the Ambracian Gulf instead of taking the car tunnel, which meant I ended up cycling 167 kilometres. Most of the morning was spent in low fields and hills. I did, however, start seeing the first signs for Patras, what I had initially intended to be my ultimate destination. At 4:30, I reached the causeway to Lefkada Island, where my friend was staying. I got up early to be there on time and arrived at 6:10. After months of campsites and hostels, the luxury of a villa with a pool was almost overwhelming. I spent an evening drinking beer, floating in a watermelon, telling stories and catching up with friends. We had an amazing barbecue, then went for drinks. It was so nice to socialise and party with people I knew, but I was very tired. The next day of cycling would, I thought, be my last, and definitely my longest, so I accepted the generous invitation to stay on for another day and go out for a boat ride. Nearby was the yacht which had once belonged to Jackie Kennedy and Onassis. We went out to visit a cave and it got pretty choppy, so we ended up going to an island restaurant instead. I was so grateful for the luxury and hospitality. It felt so weird to have cycled from just down the road to a family holiday in Greece. Thanks again for letting me stay. Tomorrow I'll be in Patras. Last leg of the journey, hopefully. Sea, pool, transport. Off we go. I set off at 7 AM as the sun was rising. At the time I thought this would be my last leg of the journey. I'd started out in July because a Greek friend had invited me to visit him at the end of August. It was now the 17th and all my other friends were already there waiting. I just had 189k to go. I crossed back over the causeway and once again saw signs for Eurovelo 8. I cycled on, mostly along the coast, up and down mild hills in the searing heat, sweating like mad, constantly concerned about the state of my wobbling back wheel. At 1 I stopped in the shade and had an isolate to cool down. I cycled over more hills and causeways, passing roadkills of foxes, dogs, kittens, lizards and tortoises, all standard. I was very excited to see my friends and give my body a rest, but I knew I'd missed this. At 5:30 I rounded a bend and...
That's Patras, right there. What I've been aiming for this whole time. I'm only 20 kilometres away, so pretty close. However, I have already cycled 165 today, which is, I think, the longest day I've ever done. So, a bit tired out, but almost there. My back wheel's wobbling. I've got to take it off and check if the back axle is cracked, because I think it might be. But we'll deal with that when we have to. The end is in sight. I cycled on for a while, Patras constantly to my right, getting closer and closer to the bridge over the Gulf. I spent 15 minutes fruitlessly searching for a bikeway onto the bridge, but eventually ended up on yet another ferry. It was free. My destination is over there. About 10 kilometers away. It was an odd mixture of emotions as the supposed end approached. I was so proud to have made it and was looking forward to a rest, but I knew that I didn't want to go home just yet. There was still some summer left, my legs still had some juice in them, and I'd always wanted to go to Istanbul. I cycled the final 7 kilometers to my friend's flat, enjoying the moment, and arrived at 7:25. Hello, Matthew. How's it going? Good. Okay.
I said hello to Nicholas, who'd invited me, then sat down for some food. I'd made it. 3 more of my friends were there, and we all went out to explore the city. I couldn't quite believe I was here with friends.
Moving to New Zealand, so...
I knew it wasn't really over, but it was time for a rest.
You said that, but
I don't believe that for a second.
No bars that I know serve food.
Yeah, but I guess.
After 10 days of resting and partying with friends in Patras and Ikaria, I decided I wasn't done with cycling. I was going to Istanbul. I got my back axle fixed by a very enthusiastic Greek man who gave me a speech on hard work. And the next day, after a late send-off breakfast with friends, I set off for Delphi. I intended to go 136 kilometers today, but ended up only getting underway after 2 p.m. And my navigation system, with no route to follow, insisted on taking me up into mountains, which were completely impassable. Eventually, around 5, I ended up cancelling my hotel reservation, heading back down to the coast, and aiming for the nearer town of Galaxidi. I spent the next few hours speeding as fast as I could along tarmac roads towards the town, ignoring the slightly zingy taste of the water in my camelback, which I had to clean with bleach, as it had gone slightly mouldy after not being used for 10 days. The sun set at 8, and I turned my headlights on, arriving in the hotel at 8:30. The owner and his friend were very friendly, and very impressed with my cycle. I like it when that happens. Today was a very short day for me, so I spent the morning exploring the town, sending off postcards and chatting to the hotel owner. He was amazed when I told him I was 23. He said I looked 33. I think it's the beard. I followed the main road all day until, near Delphi, it diverged into olive groves full of winding dirt footpaths. I weaved through this maze before starting the steep, winding ascent out of the valley to the village above. The views are incredible. I could see where the Greeks chose us to be a holy place. At the very end of my cycle, I found myself at the bottom of a steep staircase. I had to take my luggage off and carry my bike and bags up individually. I found my hotel at 2:30. The view was nice. After a shower, I walked to the Delphi archaeological site. I'd learned so much about this in uni, and it was crazy to be here. It was amazing, possibly my favourite so far. I saw a founding stone placed there by Zeus, sanctuaries, half of a bronze snake pillar, the other half of which was in Istanbul. There was a huge stadium at the very top of the hill, and a surprisingly complete amphitheatre. It was such a surreal experience. Ancient Greeks made pilgrimages here, and I cycled here from my house. It was all situated with an incredible dramatic scenery, and there was even a free section at the bottom of the hill. I took a billion photos, then went to the museum. Back in Delphi at 6ish, I went to a restaurant and burned my mouth on a pizza. I chatted to an elderly Australian couple who had travelled all over the world. They'd even got stuck in Kabul in the 80s when the Soviets invaded.
What are you after? You after this? I don't think you'd like it, it's chocolate.
I headed back to the hotel with some snacks, read, called a friend, and watched the light fade over the valley.
Not a bad place to stay.
This was one of the nicest evenings I had. It was a night of the blue moon, and it really did look blue from where I was sitting. I explored the town a little in the dark, then went to a tavern, and of course, bought a pint. I missed my friends, but it was nice to be on the road again.
I'm watching some of my Croatia videos and enjoying the vlogging, so I decided to carry on a bit. I've decided to cycle to Istanbul, which will be fun. To cycle from Delphi today. It's my shirt drying over there because my bag is wet. I think there's condensation, but back on it.
The route was easy and beautiful for 20 kilometres as I wound through the valley, even passing through a crowded ski town on the way. Then my beeline took me onto a gravel track, which quickly devolved into a rock and grass path, then into nothing. I don't trust it at all anymore. I self-navigated back to the main road and continued down for a while, then up and up and up into the hills. I'd noticed a leaking tyre early on, but only ended up taking a look at it at 2 PM. I tried fixing it, but only made it worse, and cycling uphill with a leaky tyre was very difficult. I stopped in the shade of a church at the top of the hill, then the downhill began. I was aiming for a bike shop to buy a new inner tube. I had to cycle along the coast, past many barking dogs. One of them even bit into the pannier, but eventually a local called them off. The bike shop was, of course, closed, and I got to the campsite at 6:30. I have 3 inner tubes, all with punctures, but I did my best to fix one of them up. We carried on through barking dogs and up shallow hills, then reached the first village water fountain since Italy. I stopped in Lamia for a new inner tube just in case, and mountain iced tea. This stuff is great. Soon I was going along the bottom of an enormously wide valley, aiming for the distant mountains of Meteora. Up to turn, because I'm bored and going slowly. I've been cycling through some yellow barren wasteland for a while now, doing a lot of uphill today. The map says it's supposed to be flat, but it feels like uphill to me. 100 kilometres into 160 kilometres a day. Middle America, isn't it? It feels like that. It's not really me. I carried on as the view grew wider and wider. I got ravenous and at 4:30 bought a sandwich from a cafe, which pepped me up. 2 hours later I was in Trikala at the hostel. The host cut back some trees for me to put my bike away and chatted about the trip. Then I went out to explore the town. I went up to the Byzantine castle, but couldn't get in because the place was full of teens and young adults waiting for a concert or something. Instead I went to the main square, bought a burger and some dirty fries. Then I went back to the hostel and booked my flight home to the UK. It's on the 22nd of September. I have 3 weeks left. Up at 8 for a short cycle, only 25 kilometres today. By 10:30 I could see Meteora looming in the distance, and by 11 I was moving through the town. This is one of the most unearthly places I've ever been. I set up my tent in the campsite, handed over my passport, then went for a hike to the monasteries.
Alone in Meteora, no one to talk to, so I'm talking to myself. This is my view. Not bad. Lots of monasteries about apparently. Trying to find my way around, probably gonna get lost. Don't have the best walking shoes, but all I've got. Should be in Istanbul in a week or so, but my flight back. Yeah, cool.
In Meteora there are 6 remaining monasteries, all perched atop high pillars of stone. These started out as hermitages, founded by Christians fleeing persecution. Some of the original hermitages also remain. I spent the whole day walking alone on the hiking trails below the mountains. It was a nice treat to be able to travel on foot alone, unencumbered by my bike. I made my way up and into the monasteries themselves. I wonder what's in here. Oh. All of them had incredible views. I felt like I'd teleported to China or something. I visited the monasteries at speed, wanted to get them all done before they closed, though I did take a short break to talk to Demetrius, a tourist bus driver, before I went to the nunnery. Then I took the most direct route to the next monastery. This is actually one of the most mental places I've ever been to in my life. Look at this. Jesus. I'm not even sure this is a path. I'm trying to get to a monastery in time, but it feels a bit dangerous right now. I simply couldn't believe I'd never heard of this place before. There's so much more to Greece than just the coast. The biggest tragedy of the day was that at some point I ate a chocolate ice cream and forgot I now had a moustache. I visited 5 of the 6 monasteries, then took a long, foot-bruising walk to the Eurus place. Back at the campsite, I went for a swim in the shade of the mountains. What a spot. I bought some more mountain iced tea in town and a spanakopita. Stacking in Greece was a delight. I cycled up out of town past Meteora. Lovely views up here, but tons of fucking flies buzzing around my head the whole time. Can't wait to go downhill so I can outrun them. Jeez. Little did I know that today would be the most elevation game in the entire cycle, bigger than the Alps. I got past the endless false summits and chasing dogs until at last I was in a flattish area. I was glad to be past it all, and then... shit. Bollocks. Fuck. I'd forgotten to check out that morning, and my passport was 90 kilometres behind me, over some mountains. I arrived at the hotel at 6:20 in a state of agitation. The receptionist, however, was very helpful and calmed me down. Another guest at the hotel, Panos, convinced me to just get it sent by courier the next day. He spoke passable English and kept buying me drinks, so I drank and ate pizza with him late into the night. Update. I'm in this hotel room. Quite a nice one, but also quite spenny. You know, bed, TV, balcony. Only supposed to be here one night, however, I accidentally left my passport at the campsite last night, which is 115 kilometres away, and it's raining, so I called them. They're going to try and send it to me. I don't know how long I'm going to have to be here, spending €45 a night, but it's going to be raining for the next few days, so I'm quite glad not to be cycling, really. The ups and downs of the journey, eh? That evening, between bouts of rain, I explored the town, finding a nice pub, and I even went to see Oppenheimer with English subtitles, something I've been wanting to do for a while. The day spent sat alone in a boring hotel room in a small, rainy town did start to take their toll, but at the end of day 66, my passport arrived. I booked a room for one more night and took a bath in a tiny bathtub. Then I went out to the town and the cinema again. I went back to the same pub and met another friendly Greek man. He was a chef and a food taster. He gave me his food and even fetched local wine from his house, as I simply had to try it. The next day, I was at last out of Gozani. I'd spent far longer there than I intended. The people were absolutely lovely, some of the nicest I met, but there wasn't much to do.
Overcast, cold, rainy a little bit. I was supposed to stay with a guy Gozani today, but changed my mind because I've been there too long. Cycling to Thessaloniki. See how that is? I've got 3 nights there because I'm way ahead of schedule, so. Not the best landscape. It'll do. I accidentally ended up chasing these cows through town. Not what I intended. They're finally fucking off. Jesus.
I was so glad to be back on the road again, but as I followed my Maps.me route up into the misty hills, I had no idea what I was about to go through. I set out from Gozani that morning, despite the spitting rain, because I was eager to get a move on. I knew there was a storm hitting Greece, and I did avoid the worst of it, but I didn't have a good time. I soon reached hills, and climbed, and climbed. Soon I was up high near the clouds. It began to rain. It continued. It rained more. The roads devolved into gravel paths, then mud, then rivers. It was still up, and it was still rain. Soon my back wheel was spinning in the mud. It sucked the bike down into it, then tried to steal my sodden shoes off my feet. I got angry. My map app had promised me downhill, which never seemed to come. I yelled against the rain and the mud and the fucking uphill. It went on for hours. At last, after days it felt, I reached downhill. I was in a cloud. I could see maybe 10 feet in every direction. The hill was mud and rivers. Twice I fell off the bike. The chain came off and wedged. I unstuck it, resulting in a bloody hand. Blood and mud and wet. Fuck this. You joined me at a very low moment, in a very high place. This video was taken when the phone was waterlogged, so the audio is terrible. Eventually, I reached the town and the road became tarmac. The fog cleared. Fuck yeah. Right off the road. It's alright in the end, as it always is. I spent the last 100 kilometers in Thessaloniki, avoiding Vahina, where I'd intended to stop to see the tomb of Philip of Macedon. Instead, I got to the hostel, checked in, had a shower, then went out drinking. Food and drink and company more than made up for the trauma of the day. I even met a guy who was cycling to India. For the first time on this trip, I took my time in Thessaloniki, staying there for 3 days. I visited Ataturk's childhood home, meaning I technically made it to Turkey on day 68. I went to the White Tower and they charged me to get in, even though it was free for under 25s. The bastards. The beard's becoming an issue. The views from up here were nice. I got bugatsa, recommended by a Greek friend, then went to the War Museum. That evening, we tried and failed to see a reggae show in an amphitheatre. The next day, I went on a walking tour of the city with a guy I met the night before and some of his friends. We got talked into going on a short, expensive boat ride, but it was kind of fun. It was nice to explore the city with people. I think I prefer the slower style of travel. Oh god, oh god, keep away! I don't know this song! I don't know! We went to a music show in an abandoned military base. The next day we visited the beach, avoided a protest and bought a cake. Music continued to be a theme. Thanks to everyone I met in Thessaloniki. I loved it there. Back on the bike for a relatively short day. I was up at 8 and said goodbye to everyone in the hostel. I downloaded about 1 billion albums and left at 10:30. At 1 I stopped to eat by a lake, and by 3 I was at a campsite. It was nice to have time to relax and enjoy myself on the beach for once before the sunset. I only had 5 days of cycling left to go, and 12 days till I was back in the UK. The start of the cycle felt so long ago now. By the time I finished, it would be almost 3 months. I was looking forward to seeing family and friends and fish and chips, but I also knew that if I'd had the money, I'd have carried on as far as I could go. It had been a long journey, but I'd seen a lot, and it felt odd that it was coming to an end so soon. I took a swim, then relaxed, drank, ate and read in the sun. Later I walked along the coast to a pizza place. It's been a nice, easy day. Tomorrow will be a longer one, but each pedal takes me closer to Istanbul and to company. I spent the morning cycling along quiet roads by the sea, and later through fields in between mountains. I also saw this cool lion statue. It was good vibes today, and parts of it even reminded me of the UK or France. Among the things I saw were endless fields of dead blackened sunflower, and lots of places making those tiny memorial churches you see on the edge of Greek roads. Around midday I bought some snacks in the town and started uphill.
Down here at last. Worst is over, everybody.
Around 2 I reached the top of the hill. The downhill section was winding and short, but beautiful and fast. After that it was relatively flat to the campsite. Cool. I reached the campsite at 6 after cycling against the wind for a while. Again they had a beautiful beach, but the bay was very shallow the whole way out, so I couldn't do much swimming. I set up my tent, then went for food, where I got swarmed by midges. The deep did nothing. I set off at 9:30 through Nestos National Park. Smooth causeways took me through vast lagoons and wetlands populated by flamingos.
Now this is more of a nature reserve than I was expecting.
At 10 I stopped to explore a couple of monasteries built on one of the lakes and linked by a wooden walkway. The wetlands eventually gave way to cotton fields, which I found fascinating. Soon after this the road began running parallel to the motorway. Ahead of me I saw another cyclist, shirtless and bronzed, evidently heading in the same direction. Eventually we came alongside each other. He was a German cycling to Istanbul too, then flying to Nepal and carrying on to Indonesia. We chatted for a while, but he was older and more laden than me, and eventually had to stop for a rest. I sped off, and soon was speeding towards the sea. I cycled along a stony path past endless beautiful beaches.
Just cycling on the coast here, and I think that's the remnants of a wildfire.
I cycled through this scorched area for a while. In the middle of it were the ruins of a temple to Apollo. It was an unearthly place to be. I reached the municipal campsite in Alexandroupolis around 4:30.
Heroes of Greece, I think. Lighthouse. Sea.
I watched the sunset in a cafe, bidding goodbye to Greece after exactly 1 month.
Almost in Turkey. This is the landscape. Feels like I have flat tyres, but I think it's just because the tread's gone completely. I don't know. A few more days of cycling and then I'll be done.
which will be a relief. Turkey over there, I believe. New country, almost new continent, not quite. The end is in sight.
I'd settled for 8, and by 1 I was approaching the Turkish border at last.
So I'm into Turkey, not in as high a mood as I was half an hour ago. Got here and the only option I had for data was 40 euros. So I decided not to do that. I don't have enough money on my card, so I couldn't get cash out, which I need. So I decided, fuck it, I'll just pay the 40 euros. Went back, no one there. So I haven't got any data. I've got 250 Turkish lira, which hopefully will get me somewhere, but I think it's only about 7 quid. I tried to buy an ice cream to cheer myself up, but they only took cash, and my cash is limited, so I didn't get that either. But hey, new country, almost there. We'll work it out, it'll be good.
Despite my border frustration, I was in a high mood. I went into a friendly cafe in Uppsala and used the Wi-Fi to give myself some money and buy a Turkish tea. I tried to use quiet side roads, but a friendly local advised me against it, so I cycled along a dual carriageway to Kasan, where I bought a SIM card and got another free tea. I failed to find somewhere cheap to stay in town, so I made a dash for a campsite on the coast before the sunset. These were some of the nicest roads I cycled on the whole time I was in Turkey.
Turkey, red dirt, green trees, decent road for now. Sun's setting, but not too far from the campsite, like 7.5k. Hopefully it exists and lets me in. If not, I have to wild camp, I guess. Definitely something wrong with my bike. I think the back axle might be fucked again, but to get me to Istanbul, I think. So fingers crossed, keep on pedaling, we'll make it.
I cycled through sunflower fields and arrived at the campsite just in time, setting up my tent as the sun set. Awake at 7, packed and off at 8. Paved side roads took me east through sunflower fields till around 1 when I rejoined the highway in Malkara.
Just sunflowers, wilted everywhere. I assume on purpose, because if it's all waxed, then everyone's a bit fucked, aren't they?
It was tiring and stressful being constantly zoomed past by trucks, so I took a couple of rests in fields I passed.
So in Turkey so far, there's been a few nice side roads, but most of them are a bit shit. So I've been following the main road, essentially a motorway, only with 2 lanes and then a third massive hard shoulder you can cycle on, which is, it doesn't feel that bad, but it is fucking tiring. Basically got seats, but they're all in the sun, so I'm gonna have to sit in the shade and in the trash and not just stand for a bit. I think I'm ill, got a cold or something. I stopped early and I felt like I could fall asleep, but only 40 or so k to the campsite tonight. Then I will eat and sleep and do the next 120k to a hostel in Istanbul, where I can stop. There it is, Turkish flag. Can't zoom in. I followed a side road that eventually turned into dirt and rocks. Turkish roads have a tendency to do this. I passed people burning trash and had to walk for a while until I reached the main road again. I passed through a town, then zoomed the final 15k to a campsite. It was a nice final campsite. Hopefully my last campsite of the trip, which is good because my tent's broken and my sleep mat now has a hole in it. Hostel tomorrow, fingers crossed, as long as I make it into Istanbul in one piece. And then home. I set up my tent for the last time, then got some free broth at the cafe. At the last campsite of the trip, I think. The tent is over there. My seat mat had a puncture in it yesterday, so we'll see if the bike patch I put on it holds it. If not, there's a possibility of sleeping this tonight, although the cafe is right there. I don't know what time it closes, so maybe not, but I'm pretty exhausted, so looking forward to being in Istanbul. Looking forward to not having to cycle anymore because it's getting painful, literally painful, and the roads aren't that nice. But I'm not looking forward to stopping and having to go back to life, so maybe in the spring, if I've saved up any money, I might come back out and carry on, do it properly. We'll see. Need to earn some money. Last morning, I think. Kept last night. Seat mat stayed up, which is good. Like, that's the sea. 8 AM, so not that early. I really got to make to get to Istanbul soon. I woke at 7 and packed up my tent for the last time. As far as I'm aware, this was the last time this tent was ever used. It got me from Bristol to just before Istanbul, through rains and storms and wind. But a pole had broken on the first day and had never really been fixed. And now a second pole was breaking, and it was ripped. I planned to throw it away, but kept it with me for the aesthetic.
Off we go to Istanbul, basically following this road all day. It should be fun. It won't be fun, it will be stressful, but then I'm done, so... I listened to music and phased out as the truck zoomed past and the city grew nearer. Of course, the last cycle can't be puncture free. It's like a bad one. Used to have a spare on this side road now, which hopefully will get me some way. Got this first. Around 60 kilometres from the city, I reached the suburbs. For the whole trip, everyone had been warning me about the cycling to Istanbul, and I could see why. The suburbs got more and more intense, until soon I was cycling on major 6-lane highways with no hard shoulder and speeding traffic. It's fun. I reverted to Maps.me to take me on quieter routes, which mostly involved a lot of steep urban hills. I tried to film when I could, but spent most of my time weeding through traffic and being a road user downhill and a pedestrian uphill. A short stretch of cycle path by the sea deceived me that the worst was over. But soon I was back in the main town, being stuck behind cars and watching my phone battery fade away. No one seemed to know the road rules, if there were any, so I ignored them too and went the wrong way down one-way streets many times. At 6:15, I reached the old city, and half an hour later I was at the main square, full of mosques and monuments, where I was obliged to wheel my bike. This is the other half of the bronze pillar I'd seen at Delphi, right in the middle of the city. That was such a cool moment. I carried on down the main promenade until I reached the Blue Mosque. Here, I finally accepted I'd made it. I rounded the corner to the Hagia Sophia, the same people were passing, and took my photo again. I felt elated, proud, and sad to finally be here. Made it. Made it to Istanbul. There it is, out there. That's just the sea. I checked into the hostel, showered, then played drinking games. Later, the free shisha came out. I chatted to people from Finland, Kazakhstan, and California, and just took in the fact that I was here. The journey was over. I was no longer cycling. Now I was just a tourist in a really cool city. The cycle was over after 76 days. Tourist time. I spent the day visiting Topkapi Palace with a bunch of French people. And I got my first view of Asia of the trip. This place outdid both Venice and Versailles in terms of opulence. I saw endless jewels, gems, and granite roads. After that, I wandered town alone for a while. I went to buy a new journal in the bookshop as mine had run out. The proprietor invited me to eat apple and drink whiskey with him. He even refilled the bottle when we ran out. I spent over an hour there, chatting. Then I went and got more knefe, the dessert that inspired me to come. It wasn't quite as good as in Albania. The hostel had arranged a belly dancer, and I was right in the line of fire. Then a few of us went out drinking. These were the travel experiences I've been missing out on. The next day I spent alone and visited the Blue Mosque. It was pretty spectacular. And educational. I visited the Basilica Cistern underneath the city, and appropriately started to feel stomach cramps. The kebab from last night had given me my first case of food poisoning of the whole trip. My tent, which has got me all the way through Europe. Kind of sad, but I can't really pack the poles anyway. And they're broken, been broken for weeks. I held together by sellotape. Tent's mostly alright, but it's got a little rip in it. We'll probably keep the tent, replace the poles, but poles are so shit at this point, it's hard to get placement for them. I may as well just buy a whole new one, and it will save me a lot of space in my luggage, so it's got to go. But I'm sad. I left the tent in the bin, a decision I now regret. This was the last day of my long hair and beard, another decision I regret. We explored the Grand Bazaar and a few mosques, then wandered over to the Glatter Tower. It cost €20 to get in, not worth it, but the views were nice. Did you know that Istanbul has a lot of mosques? I really did like the skyline of this city. We wandered back by the water and picked up some legendary fish sandwiches. Then we finally went to the Hagia Sophia. It's my favourite mosque so far. It's a converted Orthodox church, and if you look close enough, you can still see some Christian imagery. That evening I went to get a haircut from a real Turkish barber. When I got back to the hostel, my friends didn't recognise me. Psych, I'm cycling again. I took the bike over to another hostel to see a different part of the city. This would be my last chance to cycle as it was coming apart today. I spent the day trying and failing to find cardboard bike boxes in bike shops. Then I happened to spy one under a bridge as I was passing in a bus. A friendly bike shop near the hostel took my pedals off for free. My bike is now packed. Easy peasy. Ready to go on a plane if I can work out how to get it there. This is the tan line from my beard and bike helmet. That night I came second in a pub quiz and hung out with some Kiwis. On day 81 of cycling from my front door, I went to Asia. This offal and spice sandwich was very tasty. This bunch of people were very fun to wander about with. We explored a few hip areas and markets, and I bought a lot of snacks. Then we took a ferry back over the river, which was a beautiful experience. Istanbul really does feel like a city at the centre of things. We went out for food with some people from the hostel. We got free kunefe because it was 2 of their birthday. Most people didn't like it, so I ate a lot. Then a few of us went back and hung out in someone's room and balcony for drinks and deep chats. I really enjoyed this night. I spent the morning exploring another palace. There's too many of them in the city. I then went to a cheaper man and got a grotty but good value massage. Then I went and got an even better fish sandwich by the water. However, I wouldn't enjoy the benefits of it for long. That evening, after a pub quiz, I went to a pub crawl. It was intense, and partway through I took myself off to be sick. I closed my eyes in the bathroom at 2 AM, and when I opened them again, it was 7 AM. I got up and opened the door. The bar was closed. The door was unlocked, but there was a shutter down over the entrance. I had a flight out that evening. I decided not to panic. Instead, I just crouched down and looked at the gap under the shutter. It was 4 or 5 inches and had some give. I reckon I could fit through there. So I squeezed myself out, head first, shirt buttons scraping on the concrete. Lucky the cycle would help me lose some weight. I popped out into the early morning commute of Istanbul, and a man was stood outside smoking a cigarette. He looked at me in confusion, and I said, "Sorry mate," and ran off into the street. I got back to the hostel at 7:30 and slept for 2 hours. But my shoes, which had got me this far, were soaked in something, so into the bin they went. Thanks Jack from my hostel for helping me get my bike to the airport. I couldn't have made it without. At the airport, I ended up checking out of the country, then back in, then back out again. Eventually I was on a plane back to the UK. Home, at last. Bike is back. Hopefully not broken. We landed in Gatwick around 8:30, and a fellow passenger helped me get my bike to the lobby. Then I had my first taste of proper English food. I was staying with my brother in Greenwich, then going to the party of a uni friend in Dulwich. It was so weird to be back among the people and places that I knew. That evening I hung out with some more uni friends in Peckham and was finally able to tell all my stories. Due to poor planning, I set out for Eton at 2, in possession of a different brother's tent. It was so relaxing to cycle through London after the craziness of Istanbul, something Londoners might find hard to believe. Everything felt so tame here, even the air felt familiar. I set up my tent under a bridge in Eton, which my brother had recommended. Here I filmed a vlog with my hand over the microphone, evidently having learned nothing from the last 3 months. Over there, which I'm going to head into. The filling dish was of course top of the list. I passed the students dressed like Harry Potter, then headed out into the English countryside. I've missed this. It really is a pretty country. The last day but one called for a fancy meal. Everything is damp, including inside the tent. A pesky dog made packing the plane difficult, so I set off at 8. These are the new shoes I bought just before jumping on the coach to the airport in Istanbul. They're not very good. I took a detour along the canal to a pub where a friend worked. His boss gave me a free pint as a welcome back to England. I was planning to be home well before dark, but of course, on this last stage, a puncture delayed me. I cycled back along the Bristol-Bath railway path, then through parks, to home. There's the bike, giving it away. Last time on the trip, back where it started. You see the bike, yeah. You want to stay behind. I got in, said hello to my family, had food, and had a bath.